A famous quote that Warren Buffett once said is that investing is simple but not easy. Now, being real with you, I've made many investing mistakes, and I'd be surprised to hear someone say they never have. But the best thing of all is the growth that comes from making mistakes, learning from it, and taking action before it's too late. Because of that, here are some of the most important mistakes that you need to avoid, with the first one being that you don't have an emergency fund. An emergency fund is somewhere you place your money, typically 3 to 6 months of living expenses, in order to have a safety net in case of an emergency. Now, this may sound silly or irrelevant, but the truth is, to actually invest, you need to have at least some money set aside, like an emergency fund, where if you need access to money, you're not going to be forced to sell your investments. Say that you had all your money invested in the markets, but you need cash as soon as possible, so you have to be forced to sell those positions. That could really harm you if the markets are in terrible positions, or if you have to take on a bunch of capital gains that you did not want to do otherwise. I'll discuss this in more detail later, but a key factor toward building wealth from investing in the markets is to have the discipline to hold long term. Being forced to sell your investments is a huge investing mistake. And that's actually why I recently created videos on high yield savings accounts, because they are a great place for your emergency fund that have nearly no risk, and you can currently get around a 5% return. And they have nearly no risk because they're FDIC insured, which you're not going to get from investing in the markets. So besides that, having an emergency fund should also reduce your financial stress and help you with your decision making when it comes to making investments. I say that because you're less likely to make emotional, impulsive driven choices because of fear or temptation to get quick results. On top of all that, having an emergency fund will make you less likely to fall into debt, where you might have to pay extremely high rates if you fall into something like credit card debt. Now, understanding your situation and planning ahead with an emergency fund can have a major impact on your investing and overall financial health for your future. With that being said, let's now move on to the number 2 investing mistake, that is not investing. If you're someone that doesn't invest at all, then you're already making one of the worst mistakes that you could possibly have for your financial future. If you just have cash sitting, then inflation is going to be eating away at its purchasing power every single day. Many people also think that they need $10,000, $100,000, or even $1 million to start investing so that they can get good money from it. But the truth is, starting today with even $10 is a great start to putting you in the right direction. So whether it's lack of awareness, fear, procrastination, or any other personal factor that's the reason why you haven't started, you really just need to start as soon as you can. I've heard so many times from people that say that they're going to start in the next couple weeks, maybe the next couple months, but years later, I hear that they still haven't even started. And in my honest opinion, I think that the ones that don't start don't truly understand the power of compound interest when it comes to investing your money. And what that basically means is that when you invest your money, you're going to be making more money on top of the money that you're already making. So it's just a whole cycle of money making money on money. This can also be referred to as the snowball effect. And what this means is you have a snowball at the top of a hill and it starts rolling down the hill. The more that it rolls down, the bigger and bigger it's going to get. And this is similar to money. Once you start investing, the longer that you have it invested, the bigger and bigger your money is going to grow. So with that being said, leading me into the next mistake, which is number 3, and that is going to be the waiting game. The waiting game is a serious concern for many people because, like I said earlier, I've heard many times that they're going to start and that they will eventually, but never end up starting. If you waste 1 to 2, even 3 years plus from investing, it does have a major impact on your financial future, where if you had a plan and were disciplined to it, you could see tremendous results. I'm not saying to be a freak about this, but understand the differences can be massive, so I'm going to show you a real world example. Say you start investing in a Roth IRA and put the max contribution as of 2023, that is $6,500 per year. Let's say you do this for 20 years and get an average annual return of 8%. That means after 20 years, you would have turned $136,000 contributed into roughly $351,000. The craziest part about compound interest is time. Time in the market is the best thing that you can do with your money. Let's change this to 30 years, and that means your entire portfolio jumped to $850,000, and that's considering you continue to add the $6K per year, but the total interest earned got tripled. So that right there is the power of compound interest. Say you start at 20 years old and do this until you're 60, your portfolio would now end at roughly $2 million. And just to mention, that amount would be tax-free if you used a Roth IRA, which I made many videos on, and I'll leave links in the description of this video for you to check out if you're interested. Now, if you are struggling, I personally recommend to at least start with broad-based index funds because they are extremely low in fees, are super easy to buy, well diversified, and have historically achieved great returns like what I just showed you. So that's it. The difference if you wait has a huge cost, so start today. Even if it's $10, you're taking action and having a great start to your financial future. With that being said, let's now move on to the number 4 investment mistake that you need to avoid, that is timing the market. If you're one that's always hesitating whether you want to buy the stock right now or when you need to actually get get in, this is something that you need to just either get small increments of or start getting broad-based index funds where the volatility doesn't matter as much as ones like small cap stocks. So if you're someone that waits for the best moments, realize this. If you invested $10,000 in the S&P in 2007, that would have turned into $35,000 by 2022. But if you missed the 10 best days, that would only be $16,000 that the 10,000 would have turned into. And worst of all, if you missed at least 20 of the best performing days, you would start achieving negative returns overall. And as you can see, all the negative returns, that alone is the reason why I say to invest as soon as possible into securities that you plan to hold for at least 10 years plus. Something else I love to refer to is a famous phrase by Ray Dalio, who states, "Trying to time the stock market is harder than competing in the Olympics." In the interview he had when he said this, he also said that Bridgewater spends hundreds of million dollars a year to get an edge on its competitors. Personally, if I were to bet on the average person with no resources or Ray Dalio, I'd put all my money on Ray. Understanding this really stuck to me, and since then I've realized to not even try playing with the markets, but to take the best advantage I could and put the rest of my time into better things. And from there, the last reason why you should avoid timing the markets is because Warren Buffett literally won a $2.2 million bet with hedge funds where he predicted that the S&P 500 stock index would outperform their funds. His wager showed active investing, even by professionals, couldn't beat something as simple and easy to invest into as the S&P 500. And because of that, let's now move on to the number 5 investing mistake, that is having bad portfolio allocation. Now, I truly believe that many people that invest blow this one off and don't realize the importance of it. The first reason why is because many people may invest into specific companies that they love and think that are going to be great in the next 10, 20, 30 plus years, but in the end, that could seriously harm you. The simplest example to show you is, say you had $10,000 invested and you decided to have 50% of that be Apple stock and the rest other individual stocks. Now, obviously Apple is a great company and this is just an example, but what if the company died off? That would leave your account to now dropping to $5,000. On top of that, let's say the other individual stocks you had were Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. Well, you'd be pretty much putting all your money on technology. So what if technology wipes out and has all your life savings in it? So understanding how much exposure you have to one specific company and the overall sectors that you are in is extremely important, and I think is underrated. And this isn't just me. Kevin O'Leary states to never invest more than 20% in one sector and no more than 5% in a single stock or bond. Now, for those that get broad-based index funds, I highly recommend you check out the top holdings that are inside of each fund. For example, Apple and Microsoft are currently the largest holdings in the S&P 500 index fund, and the two of them combined result in 14% of the fund, since its weight is based on the size of each company. Now, if you had those two ETFs and that was your entire portfolio, you would already be breaking Kevin O'Leary's rule, which I'm not saying to follow, it's just an example, a guideline for you. But the fact is, be aware that if those two companies died off, you could potentially lose 15 to 20% of your entire account. I've talked with many financial advisors and have read a lot from other professionals like Ray Dalio, and I think that his approach is going to shock you. So yes, he does have private access to many different resources. Through a book I read from Tony Robbins with him involved in an interview, he stated the following about a portfolio called the all-weather portfolio. This portfolio would consist of 30% stocks, 40% long-term bonds, 15% intermediate-term bonds, 7.5% gold, and 7.5% commodities. So seriously, how many of you would have thought to do that? But to get even better, this portfolio from 1984 to 2013 supposedly got a 9.7% average annual return, with the worst loss in a year being 3.9%. Now, the reason why this stands out to me and why I'm mentioning it in this video is not because of the annual returns, but because of the worst loss it's had in a single year over that 30-year period, being 3.9%, shows that it has great diversification to reduce the risk of losing money. Something I mentioned in my free 3-fund portfolio guide that I have linked in the description below is that when you lose money in the markets, you need to gain much more just to break even. Some investors may go all in on the S&P 500 because it is one of the best index funds to buy, but in a given year, that could potentially go down 30 or 40%. The worst thing that could happen is that the market is down and you have to sell at that point. A portfolio with much more diversification with different domestic stocks, international stocks, and even bonds or other assets would be much less likely to crash as hard. Now, there's no optimal way to allocate because times are always changing and it does depend on your current position, but something you need to check out is this fund overlap website that I will leave linked in the description below. An example for you is VOO, which is an S&P 500 index fund, compared to VTI, which is a total stock market index fund. There is 99.4% overlap by the holdings, which makes up 85% of the weight, which means 85% of VTI is VOO. the S&P 500. So just be aware that if you only have VTI and VOO, they do have a lot of overlap and you may want to reconsider your approach. Alright, so moving on from there, the number 6 investing mistake is not considering taxes. There are many simple and legal ways that you can easily reduce how much you pay in taxes from your investments every year. The first and most popular one is called capital gains that you get from selling an investment. And that basically comes from selling a stock that you made a profit on, and then by the end of the year, when the tax deadline comes up, you're going to have to pay taxes on that profit. Let's say you bought a stock and its value went up, and if you owned it for less than 12 months, a full year, then you decided to sell it, you are going to trigger short-term capital gains, and that would be in the same bracket as your earned income, so this could be from 10 to 37% depending on your income bracket. Or if you own the stock for more than a full year, then it is considered long-term for capital gains, and you'll be charged from 0 to 20% in taxes, which is obviously much better. Another topic to be aware of is the taxes you get from your dividends. With dividends, they're either qualified or non-qualified dividends, and qualified dividends are taxed between 0 to 20% depending on your income, where non-qualified dividends are taxed at your ordinary income bracket, that's 10 to 37%. So in order to get qualified dividends and pay less in taxes, the dividends need to be coming from a US company or a qualified foreign company, and you must hold onto it for more than 60 days and must take place during a 121-day period beginning 60 days out from the ex-dividend date. All in all, if you own US companies and you hold them for at least a few months, you're more than likely going to start earning the qualified dividends that will be at a much lower rate for your taxes. Another term that you need to be aware of is tax loss harvesting that will help you from the capital gains I just mentioned. But what this means is that you can use capital losses to offset any capital gains that you have taken or are going to be taking in that calendar year. So if you have a lot of capital gains by the end of the year, you could sell any big losers that you don't want anymore, and that can help offset your gains. The last thing I'm going to mention about taxes is that you need to take advantage of retirement accounts like IRAs or 401ks. I personally prioritize myself to hit the Roth IRA limit before I invest anywhere else, because with the Roth IRA, you pay taxes in the current moment to retire with your entire portfolio tax-free. Now, a disclaimer is that you do need to be 59 and a half to take advantage of the full features, although you could withdraw your contributions if you need without any penalty. This is a retirement account for you specifically when you get to 59 or above. But this is extremely beneficial because your money is going to compound over time. So if you do this for 10, 20, 30 plus years and you end up having it tax-free, that is amazing and could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxes. And with 401ks, you could potentially get a Roth 401k with the same tax advantages where you pay taxes up front and at the end you get it tax-free. Like I said, this is preferable because it allows your money to grow and compound over time instead of vice versa, and that's why I don't do a traditional IRA. And with the 401k, the fact that it's with an employer and they could match your contributions is amazing, because say you have it at 4%, an employer can match the 4% of your check to go straight to investments. But another tax consideration that you do need to be aware of is having mutual funds inside of your taxable accounts. Doing so can actually trigger capital gains even if you don't sell a fund, and that harmed many people in the '08 recession, so be aware of that, and I'll leave a link to a video here and in the description below to a video I've created that talks much more in detail on that. Alright, so with that, let's now move on to the number 7 investing mistake, that is not planning ahead. Planning ahead allows you to do all the following. 1. Assess your current position to understand how much risk you're willing to take when allocating your portfolio. 2. Understand how much you need to save every week or month and what purpose that is for. 3. Planning can also improve your decision-making skills. 4. It can reduce the negative effect of trying to time the market. 5. It can lead you to building an emergency fund first as a safety net. And 6. Can provide you with a sense of control on your financial health. You don't want to all of a sudden be in a terrible position because you didn't understand the position that you first got yourself into. Then an extra bonus is that planning ahead allows you to stay on course by remembering your sole purpose, whether markets go up or down, is the long run. Understanding that will prevent you from any temptation to make impulsive, emotionally driven decisions that could hurt your chances to building true financial wealth. Alright, so moving on from there, the number 8 is the lack of discipline. Alright, so you now know that a plan is extremely important to have, but without discipline, you can't get any of that plan actually achieved, or if you could, your odds are much slimmer. It's extremely important to understand that because it's not just about investing, but everything in life requires discipline. Seriously, you could start investing and after 6 months consistently, you're doing pretty good, but all of a sudden, you pull it all out and you go buy Gucci shoes. You're done for. Everything that I do and have learned from the greatest of all time in the industry like Ray Dalio or Warren Buffett is to stay committed with the discipline to a well thought out plan. Everyone has ups and downs in life, but the ones that stay committed to the discipline of when times get tough, they don't fall down and stay down, they get up and keep fighting every day, you are going to have much more likeliness to achieve great results for your future. Just think about this. If the markets go down, Ray Dalio or Warren Buffett are losing potentially billions of dollars in one day. But they don't sell out and be done with it and lose. They stay committed, and eventually they're going to be making even more billions and billions of dollars. It's crazy. Truthfully, do you think that they worry or panic at all? Let me know in the comment section below, because I would bet that they smile, and if anything, they buy more. So all in all, if you want to do something extremely well, research the pros and other people in the industries that you're interested in on how they did it. Learn from history, because there's a lot that you can take into the future because of that. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. I used to hate reading and never did it as a kid, but the more that I learned about the real world, reading is amazing because you can learn from any of the pros that have summarized everything they know into one book that you can read in hours of time, and you can have so much knowledge because of it that you would never have had without that book. And to be honest, you can probably get a book for like 10, 15 bucks, but the knowledge that you get from those books is invaluable. So moving on from there, let's go on to the number 9 investing mistake, that is following the hype. Following hype news leads you to making emotionally driven decisions, which is typically for the short term and goes against everything I've said in this video. A phrase I love to go by for this is that if it's too good to be true, that's because it is. When you hear from a friend that a stock is about to blow up, more than likely, you're gonna lose money. Instead of going in on a pump and dump stock or potentially the next Apple, do your research before you go into it and know what you're getting yourself into. Something as simple as this article states, where 75% of investors are hyped about tech stocks because of AI, but less than half of them would pay to use it for personal or business use. So there's the difference between hype, which is just the idea of where it could be in the future, versus reality, where it is currently being used for a business and how it actually performs. So unless you're taking on trading as a full-time career, don't even bother spending time looking up new hot stocks or penny stocks, because in reality, they're more than likely not going to do any good for you. And you can do much better things with your life and let your money then work for you by just getting something like broad-based index funds and not even worrying. So moving on from there, the number 10 investing mistake is to avoid excessive fees. Fees have such a big role in your portfolio's performance, it could literally cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time you retire. And before I tell you the biggest fees that you need to avoid, if you invested the max amount into your Roth IRA for 32 years and achieved a 9% average rate of return, you would end with over $1 million. But if you removed 2% from your average return because of excessive fees, then you would have lost out on a potential $400,000. Alright, so here are some fees that you need to avoid in order to see the max potential for your portfolio. First is the expense ratio, and this is an annual fee that every ETF or mutual fund has, but the key here is to only have index funds. I say index funds because they are passively managed, where if you get an actively managed fund, it's pretty common to see an expense ratio between 0.5 to 1% a year that gets cut from your account, even if the fund declines in value. And just so you are aware, the expense ratio does include administrative, marketing, and management fees. And just to show you, here are some of the most expensive ETFs that you could own. So if you own ETFs or mutual funds, I highly recommend you check out if they have a high expense ratio. Other fees could be if you buy mutual funds like VFIAX, but instead of on Vanguard, you buy it on Fidelity, and that's a huge no because you'll have to pay a $75 transaction fee. If you really wanted to get Vanguard's S&P 500 on Fidelity, you could just go with their ETF version that has no additional fee, and that's actually what I have on my brokerage account. And for any investors that invest on margin, I highly recommend that you know what you're doing before you take action. That's because when you're margin investing, it means that you are borrowing money from the broker and you are using that money to invest, so you're taking on debt. Personally, if you don't know much about it, I would just avoid it, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning. Then another source that could be taking extremely high fees from you is having a financial advisor. Having a true financial advisor could cost you between 1% to 2% a year, so unless you're someone that needs one, here are 3 better options for you. 1, you could invest yourself and become financially literate from watching free content like mine on YouTube, which because you're still watching, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. But moving on to number 2, you could use a robo-advisor, which is a way where you fill out information about your risk tolerance and other inputs, and then an AI will generate a portfolio for you. And to be honest, you can do this on nearly any platform nowadays. Then the third, if you do want to talk to someone and trust to handle your finances, you should get a fiduciary instead of a financial advisor. They're very similar, but a fiduciary is someone who is licensed to legally and ethically act in the best interest of their clients. Not all financial advisors are fiduciaries, so it's really important that you do your research on this one if you are to take this approach. So you now know in detail 10 investing mistakes that you need to avoid when it comes to investing. If you found value in this content, consider joining my free newsletter where I send out financial content similar to this once a week. And if you are interested, you could also join my paid paid version where you can see exclusive content like my entire portfolio. And just so you know, I've also created free guides for you about investing, 3 fund portfolios, and savings accounts as of right now. If you are interested, they're also linked in the description of this video. And as always, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notifications button for future Money Talk content like this.